Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to the January 2024 edition of Molten Music Monthly. Is this a NAMM special? Well, not really, because NAMM really kind of wasn't perhaps that special this year, but I do have an extraordinary amount of gear to get through. I'm not going to be able to cover everything, but hey, what can we do? I'm only one person. So I'll skip all of that usual intro we do, and I also should apologise because they're building a bleeding house just right over there, so I've got constant reversing dumper trucks, and people talk to each other as they make walls and dig holes and stuff. So that's exciting. We're just going to have to go with that. The other thing is that there's been a couple of updates of things that don't really warrant their own segment. Things like Pigments 5 from Arturia. I mean, it's a fantastic synth. Go and buy it. It's got more stuff in it. That's amazing. MIDI Cake has updated their ARP. Their fabulous arpeggiator box, which is just a beautiful thing. And it has a new firmware, version 5, which gives it greater time divisions. It gives it a classic ARP mode. You can just plump a keyboard straight through it and use it that way. You can use it on one finger. You can map it to CV. You can split keyboards and all sorts of bits and pieces. It's a fantastic little box of melodic wonderment. So go and check that out. But otherwise, let's just jump straight in. So kicking us off undoubtedly has to be Korg. I mean, what are they on? I've no idea, but we all probably should get some. A fabulous array of, well, I mean, there's some interesting stuff in here, and there's some kind of, an update to this, an update to that kind of stuff in here, but it all sort of came like a tsunami just before NAMM, and everyone's just going, oh my goodness, Korg. So Korg is on everybody's lips, which is exactly what I imagine they were trying to do. So it worked perfectly. Kicking us off is a ridiculous looking KR11 compact rhythm box. I mean, this is, what it is, right? It's a little drum machine that will give you rhythms, automatic rhythms for playing along to. Perfect little piece of practice gear that is aimed, I imagine, at the home user who has perhaps no interest in producing massive synthesizer tracks of awesomeness and just wants to play along to something. It's probably going to be the mini pops of its own generation, if you know what I mean. At which point I'm going to move along to the Microkorg Mark II. Now, I have a Microkorg XL, which is always the one that nobody likes. I don't know why. I mean, I thought the XL on the end would mean it was bigger and better and more wonderful, but no, everyone just likes the regular Microkorg. Regardless, Korg have come up with a Microkorg version 2. I mean, it's been going for 20 years or something ridiculous. So it's one of the most best-selling keyboard synthesizers ever produced. It's essentially virtual analog. It's polyphonic. It's got a bunch of sounds and bits and pieces inside. So what's new in the version 2? Well, it's largely the same deal, really. You've got a knob with which to dial in different genres and then a bunch of sounds within there. Apparently, the sound engine has been massively upgraded, so it should sound really nice. One neat extra feature is the looper function, so you can record a thing and loop it. It also has a much larger screen to tell you what's going on, and somebody said that you get like achievements like you do on an Xbox. If you turn the filter, you'll get a filter achievement come up on the screen and bits and pieces like that, which sounds slightly stupid and also quite good fun, perhaps. I mean, I guess the idea behind the Microkorg is it's a simple, easy to use source of sounds. It's the sort of thing you can use in a band where it's not going to really matter. It falls on the floor, gets trodden on. It's just simple, plastic, good sounding. And now with this looper thing where you can either overdub over yourself, it has a lot of creative potential. There's nothing wrong with that. Talking of Mark IIs, there's also an Op6 Mark II, which is their FM synthesizer in that sort of desktop / keyboardy type form factor that they're pretty much stuffing everything into these days. The Op6 Mark II has more polyphony, more voices, slightly more power, that kind of thing. So it's not a massive overhaul or anything. It's just pushing it up to 64 notes polyphony and giving you lots of lovely control over that unintelligible FM engine that we all love to hate. Another new old thing is the King Korg Neo. King Korg is a sort of remarkably underwhelming large synthesizer, which was awesome because it came at a time, about 10 years ago, when it was before sort of the whole fascination we have with vintage and analog and proper knobs, and before the mini log, before the pro log, before all of that sort of stuff. Korg was kind of experimenting with the idea of virtual analog and making a usable, controllable, hands-on interface for that. And the King Korg, I think it was not a bad attempt at providing an analog experience of essentially what felt very much like a software synthesizer in the background. So, it's like rather than trying to take your computer out to a gig, you take the King Korg and you've got essentially Arturia Pigments or something of that nature running on a piece of hardware with hardware controls. It ain't now wrong with that, I would say, but it just wasn't particularly innovative or exciting, I think. And actually, at the time, people were happy on their computers. Anyway, fast forward to now, and the King Korg has been reimagined into that same form factor as the Op6 and the Wave State and the Mod Wave and stuff, which is, it's a cool size. It's a good size. I like that size of stuff. It's just enough. It has enough meat to it to make it playable, large keys, that kind of thing, enough of a control surface, and it doesn't take up your entire space. It doesn't have to take up a massive rack. It's got a lot of positivities going for it in that regard. And so essentially this is the same, as far as I can work out, it's exactly the same synthesis engine as it was 10 years ago, just reworked into a compact, more accessible form, because the original one was huge. Really was a meaty thing, and it had like a tube amplifier and stuff built in, which this does not have. But otherwise, if you want, it's a bit like the Micro Korg. It's a similar engine, I suspect, but this just gives you more available hands-on controls for all of the bits that you're actually going to need and actually going to want when performing or playing with a synthesizer. So what you get, I think, with King Korg is just a really good, workable hardware version of a software synthesizer to give you more of a hands-on, tactile interaction with what is essentially a great bunch of sounds. Talking about that form factor, they also cut all the keyboards off. The previous ones, the Op6, the Wave State and the Mod Wave, they've done desktop versions, so just the top end. Cut all the keyboards off, give you it as a module, stick it on your desk, it saves a load of space. Perhaps you just have a single keyboard running the whole lot. Makes complete sense. Good job. Well done. They've also upgraded the Grand Stage, so we now have the Grand Stage X, which is this enormous stage keyboard. Fantastic. It looks extraordinary. I still want an SV2. Desperately wanted one of those electric pianos, but the Grand Stage is, I don't know, would you ever carry it on stage? It just seems ridiculously large for that, but it's a behemoth of a flagship stage piano, I would say. Good job. The other end of the scale, we've got two new tech things. First of all, the NTS-1 Mark II. They're liking their Mark II. It's lots and lots of updates, and this is essentially the same as the other one. It's a single oscillator, little virtual analog, I suppose, digital synthesizer. It's got the one oscillator in there, which makes some great sounds. It's got some great effects, and now they've got a much better keyboard on the front, and they've expanded the engine so it can handle more of the Logue oscillators. Those third-party oscillators you can pump into the Prolog and the Minilog, you can put those in the NTS-1, and that really does elevate it to becoming a very expandable, interesting, and quite quickly more expensive synthesizer as you're buying all these third-party oscillators and stuff to go in it. What I think most people use it for is for the effects, because the onboard effects are great. They sound brilliant, and it's a really useful little box to have knocking around that you can run things through, run a send through it, just run a synth through it. Very easy, very simple, great stuff. And this is the newer version, which gives you just that little bit more. The other new tech one is the NTS-3, which is a Chaos Pad in NTS form, which, looks great. What's a Chaos Pad? You just got a pad, right? That's got an XY pad, and it creates effects and stuff. You can run it with 4 effects at the same time and all just going crazy depending on where you put things. Fantastic. It's a load of fun. It's exactly what they should do. And with all the new tech stuff, you kind of build it yourself. So it's a little DIY project. There's no soldering, nothing scary. You're just snapping together and screwing together a few bits and pieces. Simple, relatively cheap, good little boxes of fun. Now, was there anything else from Korg? Trying to think, or was that it? Is that everything covered? Oh, yes. PS3300. This is a thing. This really is a thing. I mean, the PS3300 was a synthesizer of which they built like 3 back in the 70s, and only half a dozen people had one, and they shared it between themselves. And this is built on the idea of proper full polyphony. So that means every note is essentially its own synthesizer. It has its own voice, so you can play every note on the keyboard. On what was originally a 48-note keyboard, it's now a 49-note keyboard, because that's just how keyboards come these days. And so Korg has recreated this extraordinarily rare synthesizer and is making it available. Make it available to who? You may ask. Well, heck, I don't know. People who have got many thousands of pounds knocking around in their pockets for an awesome synthesizer in a nice wooden cabinet. I mean, this is the real stuff. I mean, how it's made up is you've got 3 essential layers of synthesizer. Each one of those synthesizers has full polyphony. So you've got 3 layers of 3 synthesizers giving you this massively polyphonic and almost impossible to program synthesizer. I don't mean impossible to program, I just mean that you have to put in a lot of hard work. I mean, thankfully they've added a preset engine, so it is semi-modular behind itself, and they've got this, I mean, I assume it's some kind of digital engine behind it, which will do all the repatching for you. So you can store, I think, up to 16 sounds, something like that. I can't remember how many buttons it has over there, which you can then recall, which is a brilliant idea. I have to say, some of the demos I've seen out of NAMM have been rather underwhelming, considering the power of this thing. But I think perhaps what you should probably do is go over to Cherry Audio and download the demo of their PS3300, which is amazing, and go through the presets on that to give you a much better idea of what this synth is capable of. Because, you know, at the pressure of a NAMM show where you're just getting a quick demo and you could go pop, 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 it's not really cutting it. Needs to have someone go in there and spend a proper amount of time getting some proper sounds out of it, because it's undoubtedly going to be awesome. But we live in marvellous times where marvellous things are so marvellously possible. Just fantastic. Will it be at Synth East? I mean, Korg are going to be at Synth East, which is our fabulous Norwich-based synthesizer show. It's happening at the end of February. Are they going to bring it? I don't know. I don't know if Korg UK have access to it or not. I mean, I imagine there's only one of those in the world, because they are essentially going to be building them to order. So chances are slim, but hey, as soon as I find out, I will let you know. Oh, damn, they're reversing trucks. They're going to be the death of me today. Right, we can work through it. Right, next up, 4MS. Catalyst modules. This is a slightly weird, fascinating and really enjoyable one. So they've got the Catalyst sequencer and the Catalyst controller. They are the same module. It's the same module with 2 different firmwares. They have a reversible faceplate, so you can turn it around depending on which one you want to use. The idea was borrowed from Emblematic Systems, who created this Catalyst thing to start with. And kind of the general idea is you've got 8 modulation outputs. You create like a phrase of modulation that just goes through stuff, and you have a crossfader that takes you, morphs through all of this modulation output. So you could connect everything to everything within your rig, and then as you sweep or scan through that crossfade, it's changing everything. So you can morph from one thing to another. It's a way of making change within your system on the simple macro throw of a crossfader. Pretty phenomenal, really. I mean, it's a super idea. Super idea. I love it. I think you could also dart between pages or setups or screenshots or captures or whatever it is that these things are stored in. So rather than morphing between them, you could just leap from one to the other, creating very, very rhythmic changes, very instant changes within your set. I mean, it's kind of a preset machine to some degree, but whatever it is, it's a bit fabulous. That's the controller version, modulation control, yeah? The sequencer version is something that 4MS seem to have come up with by themselves, which is where they've turned it into a 64-step sequencer, where that sequence actually feeds 8 individual outputs. Each output can be a different length, can have a different rhythm to it, can have a good loop or other bits and pieces. Exactly how this is panning out, I'm not entirely clear on yet. And again, you can morph between different setups and different things of what it's doing. I mean, again, how does it work? There's no video. I'd like to see something on how this works, please, because I am largely fascinated. Okay, Stylophone have popped up with a couple of goodies. First one is a Theremin, which is very, very Stylophone. You know, if Stylophone were to make a Theremin, this is kind of what it would look like. It's a fantastic space-age console, nice aerial on it. I mean, it would be perfectly suited on the flight deck of something from Space 1999. It's got a couple of knobs, a dial, a bit of a slider, all this stuff going on, and you get your hands in there, and it whistles and wobbles and whoops about. Perfect. Theremin by Stylophone. Awesome. It's everything you would imagine a Stylophone Theremin could be. It's getting ridiculous out there. It's got a built-in speaker, it's got battery poweredness, you can change the center frequency, and it's even got some delay effects built in. So, I mean, it's a whole little hand-waving party within a tiny little box. However, there was something else that they had. The CPM DS2. This is something completely different, completely unexpected. I mean, Stylophone have tried to do bigger synths over the years, and it's not really landed as well as they'd hoped. It's just not quite gotten it right. This, though, is very, very different. Everything from the build quality, the look of it, the intention behind it, is very, very interesting. And this is from what we understand to be a compact modular range. So there seems to be more synthesizers, more ideas coming along. So what is a DS2? It's a drone synth. 2 oscillators, it drones. Not that it can't be pitched, it can, of course, but it's starting off as a drone synthesizer. So you set pitches on 2 different things and you get them to wobble into each other. You throw in modulations from an ultra LFO with all sorts of wave shapes, all sorts of outputs, stuff that about. Each oscillator has its own filter as well. So you've got a lot of potential for sound crafting, soundscape making, sound exploration, and without all that fussing around of trying to play a tune, because it's droning, innit? It's also got reverb and delay on the main outputs. You can take the whole thing apart and drop it into your ERAC. It's fully ERAC compatible and ready to go for that. I think that's where they're heading with all of this. And so within a ERAC environment, it could become quite a powerful dual oscillator or single oscillator or a couple of voices for duophonic playing. It has a lot of very interesting potential, and something very unlike what we would expect from Stylophone. Because Stylophone, whether they like it or not, have the reputation of being a place of fun things, fun music making noise boxes. They're great. They've got a Bowie branded one from Space Oddity. I go woo, ah, woo. I can do stuff and have a bit of a laugh with it, whereas this is a very different vibe. And as I say, they've struggled with changing that vibe in the past, so it's going to be really interesting to see how this goes. Now, I very much hope that Stylophone are going to be with us at Synth East at the end of February, so we're able to get our hands on the new stuff and really get into checking it out, because they seem to be on a mission to change who they are and what they're doing, and that's quite exciting. The Bastl Neo Trinity is up next. I've been talking about that a fair bit this month because I have one right here and I'm working on a review of it. I've kind of put the review on hold because what I found is, not to give anything away, is that I need to work out how well it works in performance. What is it? Well, it's 6 channels of recordable modulation, and that means it could be an LFO. You could essentially dial in on a knob and record that knob movement as an LFO. You can tap it in to create gates or triggers, which can then be envelopes, because within itself it can be a regular LFO on each channel. It could be a controllable, makeable, recordable one of your own LFO going around, or it could be an envelope being triggered. So you can run drum machines, you can run filters, you can run all sorts of modulation into different parts of your system. And not only that, you can also quantize the modulation to turn it into notes. So within its 6 channels, it becomes a sequencer, a filter twinger, and a drum machine, and a source of modulation all in one really small and compact and potentially fiddly package. And it's the fiddliness is the one thing that I haven't quite worked out yet, because when you're close up on a module like this, you can do all sorts of things. But in live performance, if it's supposed to be a performance module, can you find it? Can you see it? Can you do the tricky things you need to be able to do on all these buttons? I don't know. But whatever it is, I can already tell you that the Neo Trinity is a revolutionary little module that could completely transform a small system or a relatively large system. I get the feeling that there might be a need for a couple, but you can build a little groove and a little set on this module alone, you know, running oscillators in a drum machine. So I've just popped it in here. I've got an oscillator, a filter, a couple of drum sound sources, and you're away. You are absolutely away. You can't write a sequence, you just kind of dial it in. A bit like a theremin again, I guess. So it has its limitations, but for very quick, very sort of dirty, getting your hands in there things that change and transform within your rack and within your performance, it's totally brilliant. I mean, it's just simply as a source of modulation, as a source of LFOs and envelopes, it's flipping amazing. So it's got a lot going for it. I just need to really work on, you know, if I'm trying to do an honest review, I've got to see how well it works in the darkness and chaos of a live performance. So that's very exciting. So there'll be a review of this coming along probably next week, when I'll get down to exactly how awesome this thing is, or how awesome it could be if only it wasn't restrained in such a small, compact, fiddly little faceplate. Talking of modulation and waving your hands around, we have a new proximity sensor called the Airlectron, I think, from Flame. It looks like a lot of fun. You've got a module, it's got a proximity sensor here, and you throw yourself about within its space, and that generates voltages. That is kind of it, really. It's not very deep, but you can record up to 2 minutes of movement. So, thinking of it in terms of performance, you could be really working on something really interestingly and let that continue after you've needing to go and work on something else, you know. So you could put together almost an entire set's worth of, no, almost an entire song's worth of modulation, and then let that continue, and that's quite interesting, I think. The Midiverse SideBander has all sorts of complicated ways of explaining itself and its origins that come from tone clusters, which were sort of imagined by something to do with Radiohead and this other guy, composer, putting together this thing. Was it the guitarist or something or other? It doesn't really matter. I think what essentially is important about SideBander is that it's a simple looking module that absolutely generates fascinating FM tones. You've only got a couple of knobs. You've got frequency, you've got spread, you've got harmonics, and yet within that it creates these sort of folding in and modulating on itself tones and timbres which are really quite unexpected, very, very FM like, and achievable and modulatable with hardly any effort at all. I mean, you know, Bastl have done something interesting with this via the Pizza, which is an FM module which gives you a couple of different sliders and bits and pieces in order to try to get simplicity injected into the concept of pulling FM tones from competing and clashing sine waves. And I think that the Pizza does a great job at enabling you just to get in there and get some interesting sounds out. The SideBander looks like doing something similar, but on an even easier level. So you just have the opportunity to craft and tone just on a couple of knobs and find those interesting ways that these clusters of sine waves are interacting and wobbling, crashing, and ultimately distorting each other. It's really interesting. They're sending me one, so I'm going to do a good review of that, I think, because it's quite an interesting way to have this unusual form of tone in your modular without having to melt your brain in trying to achieve it. The Wave Transformer is a great big fat oscillator from Earthquaker Devices. It's designed very much with a full analog vintage feel to it, but what it offers essentially is the ability to morph through lots of different waveforms. From your standard waveforms, from your sine waves, your triangles, your ramps, your squares, your pulses, but then through to more complex waveforms as well. And this nice big knob allows you to morph between those different ideas. Simultaneously, you've got like 7 outputs for 7 different individual waveforms that this thing is generating. It has a lot of shaping opportunities with hard sync, soft sync. It's got linear and exponential FM in order to really mess around with those frequencies. and it can do far more. Besides, you should go and check out DivKid's video, because he's done a really deep dive into this oscillator, which just looks and sounds phenomenal. Oh, here's a fascinating one. The ADDAC Swell physics module. They call it by a number. An ADDAC 508, I think it is. Doesn't matter. What's the idea behind this? Well, you've got 4 outputs, which you could see as buoys floating on the ocean. And each of these 4 outputs generates a voltage, and that voltage is dictated to. The value of that voltage depends on how choppy the sea is, the ocean is that they're floating on. So if you imagine you've got these four buoys, which are a separate, or buoys, I believe they call them in America land. These 4 buoys, which are the same distance apart, this wave comes through them, and so they move corresponding to how that wave goes through. Now, if it's just a sine wave, then it's going to follow that kind of model. But with different waves, with different kinds of chaos and different ways that the ocean swell is swelling through it, you're going to get these differing heights and these changes and these movements, and this incredible sense of some kind of organic happenings, some kind of natural world phenomenon which is going on in here. Apparently it uses a Gertzner model of wavingness, which is the sort of thing they use in computer games to generate the waves on water, essentially. So it's using that idea, that mathematical model, to create this way that these things are relating to each other. You can control different elements and agitate the water and generally get the whole thing stirring. But I'd love to have a go. It's the sort of thing you could plug in and just kind of push through things, and everything could have this slightly, I guess, seasick-inducing but interconnected movement of waves that go, oh, I'm into it now, waves that go through your modular. I think it's a great idea. I really like it. I'd like to have a go at that. Sounds totally fascinating. The Yamaha SEQTRAK. Didn't see this coming. Good gracious, no. What did Yamaha suddenly went out? They probably went out on a bender with Teenage Engineering and then came back and went, oh, yeah, we could make something kind of square and angular, pump it full of stuff, right? And it would be great. And everyone went, yeah, let's do that. So they have, and they've made it funny colours. There's like a grey one, there's a bit of an orange one. It's all angular with knobs on the top. Nothing looks particularly musical, which is, Teenage Engineering to a T, really. Although it's not trying to be an OP1 or anything like that. This is very much their own thing. It just has this alarmingly familiar styling about it that just makes you think, all right, they've definitely gone for the hipster market on this one. Where's Cuckoo's video? Has he done one yet? I imagine he has. It's brilliant. Totally brilliant. But so what do you have? Well, it's kind of a composer, sequencer, groove box, those kinds of things. It's got 2 synth engines. It's got a sampler inside, and it is a little compact music creation station. The sound engines are it's sort of PCM, AW, what do they call it? AWM2 advanced waveform, something or other. Anyway, so it's got a regular sort of virtual analog synth engine in it, and then it's got an FM 4-operator FM engine in it. Of course it has, it's from Yamaha. And then, as I say, it's got sampling. What it does seem to be able to do is generate music really, really fast, which I think that's what you're after with this sort of thing. You just want to sit it down, bang in a drum beat, bang in a bit of a synth thing, add some effects, and off you go. It comes with like 2,000 presets. You've also got a built-in speaker and a built-in microphone, so you can sample directly into it. It's got a sequencer, it's got some slidey performance controls, and all of it, of course, can be rolled into an app with which to get to some of the deeper level editing of all the sounds and other bits and pieces that you can't perhaps do on the front panel. The other thing it has is a visualizer, very much like the OPZ, Teenage Engineering, which throws up a whole bunch of interesting visuals to what you're doing, which is great. Who wouldn't want that? So I imagine we're going to see a lot of stuff on the SeqTRAK over time, because it's interesting. I think it could capture the imagination of a lot of people. I think you could generate music with it relatively quickly, and the connection of the app and the visualization, the sampling, the easy way to select sounds and bits and pieces. Yeah, it's a good combination of stuff. It's very much not something we've seen from Yamaha in a long time, and if this is anything, any indication of how they're thinking at the moment, then that's very, very exciting. I'm thoroughly excited by the idea that Yamaha could be going, let's innovate, let's do something interesting that kids and people might be able to make music with and enjoy, that isn't really home focused, that is a little bit more out there. I mean, they're very much capable of doing fascinating and interesting things, and this is really good from them. Gamechanger Audio and their mod series of pedals. These look fascinating. So these are essentially guitar pedals, but with inbuilt modular patch bays. I knew we would get there in the end. It was inevitable, really, with all the amount of pedals and other bits and pieces being used with modular and desktop synthesizers. It would make complete sense for them to start to become more and more integrated. So Gamechanger have got into this. They've released 3 pedals so far in the series. You've got a modulation chorus, you've got a delay, and you've got a reverb. And what's interesting about them is that within their center valley, within the crevice in the middle, is a little patch bay, a little Eurorack patch bay. And that allows you to take the dynamics, so you play your guitar through it and it pulls off the volume shape, the envelope if you like, so it's an envelope follower. It takes that information, and it also takes pitch, and it takes that and allows you to use those to modulate different parameters within the pedal itself, or within other pedals, or within other bits of your rack, or other bits of your rack could modulate parameters within the pedal. So parameters like delay time or reverb depth, or where the chorus actually happens. It only happens at higher pitches or lower pitches, or how it turns things on and off to create expression. But of course it doesn't have to be guitar that's running through it. It could be anything. And in fact, you don't have to be using the input to modulate. You can use anything. You can use an LFO to modulate different bits and pieces. It just opens it up to some extraordinary possibilities. Not only the cross modulation between itself and its other units, but between a much larger thing. It's you sort of think about it and you go, well, what would I actually use that for? Why would I need to? What is it that I'm going to be modulating? Why do I need to change the depth of an effect? And that's always a good question. I think modulating and changing parameters within effects while you're using it is an interesting area. And it's not something that I often do. I tend to set an effect and leave it doing its thing. So I think the encouragement to get into modulating different parameters within an effect is an interesting one. Something that modular does very well, because a lot of the effects I've got here do have CV control over various parameters, reverb depth and delay time and feedback and all those bits and pieces, and those absolutely should be exploited. But what I love about these is that they look amazing, they probably sound great, and they generate a whole great big sack of opportunity of creating something different with your effects. This is quite an interesting sort of revelatory product from Suit and Tie Guy, STG Labs, and muSonics, who I think are one and the same. I don't really know. Anyway, STG Sound Labs have been messing around with Eurorack for ages. They keep coming up with stuff and bits and pieces, power banks for Mother 32 cases and other interesting bits, and he's just like gone, well, just sod it, I just can't be bothered anymore. It just didn't seem to be working. For some reason what they were doing wasn't particularly capturing anyone's imagination. There's so much Eurorack out there that it's hard to penetrate. I mean, particularly I think these days when you're making modular, you have to be a master at the social media game. You have to be in there all over Instagram. You have to be producing videos and demos of your stuff. You have to be putting it in the hands of people who can produce demos and videos of your stuff. It is all about that as being seen, that interpretation, that seeing cool things being made with a cool product. People need that. I don't think just scanning through Modular Grid looking for a module and going, oh well, let's have that one, is ever going to work. You need a weight of interesting, cool and innovative video content and media behind it. I don't think that's something that the Suit and Tie Guy is really particularly into. And so it's hard to get those modules into the world, into the mass of Eurorack enthusiasts. And so what they've decided to do is say, sod it, we'll build a 5U Moog unit synthesizer. We'll take all of our expertise, the fact that we can make awesome bits of modular stuff, and we'll build a proper size synthesizer for proper size people. So that's what they've done, and I think that's brilliant. I think it's exactly what they should do, because they are renowned for the quality of their stuff. They don't have to be wild and crazy, they don't have to be make noise or qubit or anything peculiar. They just need to build a solid, vintage sounding, awesome modular synthesizer. That's what we have with the Vanilla synthesizer. Vanilla in that it's perhaps a little bit plain, but also is actually the flavour that we really like, which I think is true, very true. So it's very much a regular modular synthesizer in a large format. So there's no fiddly knobs, there's no trying to get in there to find the different parameters and bits and pieces. No, you just patch it together and you're off. In fact, there is a bit of normalization in the back, so it can sort of be semi-modular to some degree, which just means you can turn it on and start playing without having to worry about patching it. I think it looks great, it sounds phenomenal apparently, so I wish them all the best with it. The RedShift 6 from Supercritical is looking pretty excellent. It looks very Waldorfy, I have to say, with its clean lines and slightly space age look about it. But essentially what you've got here is their Demon Core oscillator, which was a ERAE module that had this kind of cluster oscillator inside, a whole bunch of oscillators all going nuts. So they've taken that and they've stuck it in a desktop synthesizer module with proper knobs that you can get to it, proper keys and buttons, and a nice big screen so you can see what's going on. Out of this Demon Core you can pull regular oscillators, regular waveforms, or also stacked and super saws, twin oscillator engines and complex oscillations, cross modulations, and all of it emerges as something around 6 voices. The signal chain is fully analog, it then runs into a 4-pole filter. It has some flexible gain staging, some analog overdrives, and also some digital effects. And then each voice gets its own independent output. And you can, if you like, break it down into being 6-part multi-timbral. So I'm assuming that means you've got 6 mono synths going on. I've not really seen it in action yet, so at the moment it's just like an interesting looking thing on the desktop. So more news for that should be coming out, I guess probably around Super Booth. It should be available in the summer. Noise Engineering have given us some more annoyingly named AILA modules, which are cool. More AILA stuff for the AILA platform. Noise Engineering are really into this idea of different DSP platforms on which you can run different firmwares which provide different functionality. This is kind of like the oscillator center of things, and this time around we're getting a dynamically generated wavetable oscillator, an FM based wave mangling additive voice, and a digital oscillator inspired by the last millennium, whatever that may mean. I mean, what's fascinating about all of these platforms that Noise Engineering do is that you can swap firmwares. So you can buy one module and run, I think with the AILA platform, there's like half a dozen different oscillators, and each one giving you different timbres, different tones, different ideas, different ways of morphing and changing and crazing about. I mean, it's quite amazing, really. And the versatility you get through doing it this way is just off the charts. I mean, you're not always going to understand exactly what's going on because your faceplate isn't going to change when you update to another firmware, but you can always get more faceplates or draw things on them, for heaven's sake, or just buy more actual modules. But Noise Engineering also had a couple of prototypes on show at, I don't think it was NAMM, was it? Oh no, it was at the Buchla and Friends party, which I'll talk about towards the end of the video. But they had a quantized random source, I think it was, which is essentially a 4-channel sequencer of some sort, or a generative sequencer. You kind of give it ideas, and then it generates stuff, and you can change the length, and you can get stuck in there as far as the root note's concerned, and how the other channels relate to the first one, I think. And then they also have an arpeggiator where you can create arpeggiations. I think it's just essentially got a little keyboard on the front, and you push down the notes that you want, and it will generate arpeggiators through that idea of different modes and different ways and different backwards and forwards. So there's always fascinating stuff coming from Noise Engineering. You just never know what they're going to call it next. The Embodme, the embodiment of touch control, is the ERAE 2. ERAE 2. Oh, I don't know. It's a touch controller, so it's a slab of stuff. Get your fingers in, control things in an XY way, but also in all sorts of pinpointing, high precision touch and integration sort of way. You've got MPE, pressure, pitch, sliding. You can turn it into all sorts of things. It's all sort of backlit with LEDs where you can say, I want you to be a keyboard. And so it draws itself as a keyboard and you play that. I want it to be an isometric triggerer of panning stuff. And so it creates that and you do that. It's really a very versatile platform on which essentially you can build whatever kind of touch controller you like. It's a bit like what you would have had on a touchscreen, but it gives you that extra depth with pressure and a playing surface, which is a lot more interesting and favourable to your fingers. The original version, this is version 2, the original version was very much into being able to be hit by drumsticks. This does the same, but I think they've learned perhaps from them all just being destroyed before. So the idea I think now is that you have a removable cover. So for general use, you've got this fabric stuff over the top, which gives you the touchiness. If you want to play drums on it with drumsticks, then you can put this silicone cover over the top and then play that with a lot more gusto and a bit more of a familiar feel. So very, very interesting way of controlling things, very versatile, and that it can change and be different things at different times depending on what you want to control. You can also split it up into different zones and have different things going to different stuff. But perhaps what's most important about the new version is that it has a dozen or so CV outputs. So you can now be routing all this touchy-feely aftertouch, pressure, movement, side sways, all of that as modulation into your system. It's also a looper. So it has a looper function, so you can start to generate potentially notes, potentially modulation, and loop that round. It has, I think, 8 layers, and so each layer can have its own recorded loop going on, essentially allowing you to sequence all sorts of stuff going out of it. So it's very fully featured, I think. I mean, there's been a lot of touch type controllers that have given it a go over the years, and they all seem to get so far and then can't quite work out exactly what it is they're doing. This seems to be going. It seems to have legs. It seems to be offering something, and I think part of that is the fact that they've acknowledged that it needs a little bit of hardware control, because if you're going to start going into modular or something like this, you don't want to be connected to a computer. You want to just to be able to connect it and go. And so they've now developed into sort of like the top bit a few buttons and a knob and a display in order to give you the ability to configure it and change it without it being connected to a computer, which is brilliant. That's exactly what they needed to do. So that's looking better and better all the time. Okay, Sound Machines had a little bit of an update going on. They are the creators of a control surface called the LS1, which is a little tiny thing, but also a much larger one called the Arches. It's been around for a fair long time. I'm never entirely sure whether they're still in business or not half the time. But anyway, they were at NAMM and they had an update to the Arches as well as some new things to show, which I thought were pretty awesome. Now the update to the Arches, I can't tell you exactly. It's just taking this idea of this Buchla style controller and making that as available and expressive as possible within ERAE. So it generates like 32 outputs worth of control information from each of those individually movable and wonderfully fingerable, because I love the way that they actually land on your fingers. You know, to have the mental capacity to think, the fingers aren't necessarily straight when they attach themselves to a keyboard. Why on earth do we have these crazy organized straight keyboards where everything is completely ordered? Our fingers are not that shape. And so what I really like about the Arches is the fact that it's kind of curved and fits the gait of your fingers, the fall of your fingers. I mean, I don't suppose Sound Machines invented that idea. It came from Buchla, but I really like the fact that that's a thing. It pleases me tremendously. One of the reasons why I've always liked touchscreens is because you're not restricted to this flipping square-on keyboard paradigm, man. Anyway, so what is it? I don't know. So it's a touch controller with many touchable things upon it. Lots of configuration now. Lots of outputs that you can run through your thing. So it gives you an opportunity to really perform into every aspect of your modular. Fantastic. It's always looked great, and it just looks even better now. Now, the other thing they've done is this T-series, T for touch, probably, T-series of modules, which essentially takes their light strip idea, the LS1 idea, and stuffs it in a module. I mean, why not? Why not do that? Why haven't they thought about this before? This looks great. So within this T-series, they have a complex oscillator, they have a formant filter, they've got a spectral thingamajig, and some such, and they're relatively simple modules. There's not a massive amount going on, but you've got a row. They all look very, very similar. You've got a row of 4 knobs, and you've got the light strip next to it. So I think the idea is that for whatever parameter you like, you can just whoop up and down on the light strip, and it will automate and record and loop and whatever it is you want to do. So it becomes a very, very animated, self-animating, if you like, module, which is brilliant. I hope they do a whole load of these. I think it's a great idea. I mean, you could, of course, just have the module and then have an LS1 next to it and route from one to the other, but this enables you to do this background patching and enable you to route at different parameters without having to connect and unconnect, and obviously gives you multiple layers of control and automation over stuff. Great! Yeah, big fan of that. Right, we're nearly there, I think. Just want to talk about this Buchla business, because something's going on. It's quite exciting. I'm excited about it. I hope you are too. But it seems, from what I can understand, that alongside NAMM, because NAMM has become this kind of dinosaur, really. I mean, it's still great for guitars. It's great for old school rock stars and old school music distribution, musical instrument building. That's great. I hope it keeps on going. I hope they still fulfill those bits. But it's hideously expensive to put on a booth at NAMM. It just is. It's a nightmare. And so if you're a little tiny company with doing modular or other little synthesizers and bits and pieces, there's just no way you can afford it. No way. I mean, it's cheaper if you're in America. It's cheaper to fly to Germany and do Super Booth. It really is. Or Synth East, of course. So I don't see there being a whole lot of future in modular and synthesis at NAMM itself. It's not the best place for it. There's nothing cool about it unless you build an elaborate booth. It's just an empty space. It's a big warehouse full of things, full of rows and rows and rows of different stuff. It's not really what works best for how awesome and esoteric and aesthetic and warm and human and organic everything about modular synthesizers and analog synthesizers, digital synthesizers, control, this music making ability we have to generate awesome electronic sounds from boxes. It just doesn't fit into the starkness of that kind of arena. So what happened this year is that Buchla decided to put on its own thing, like a side quest, a sideshow. I don't know. Another event called Buchla and Friends, and it's genius. This is exactly what they should be doing, and this is perfect. This is the time for Buchla to re-emerge, I think, and to reassert themselves, because I feel, from my limited experience of them, that they've kind of struggled over the years. They've never really found the footing that Moog has, or had, or may have, and they've not really tied and tapped into ERAC until very recently. And I think that I'm going to pause. I'd rather have the chickens. Okay, what was I saying? So, however, more recently, Buchla have really started to bloom, to refine themselves. And a lot of that has been through the tip-top audio connection and in pumping out all of that Buchla stuff into ERAC. Brilliant, great idea, fantastic, just gets it out there. But meanwhile, behind the scenes, Roman from Black Corporation has been designing and redesigning and rebuilding all of the Buchla 200 series modules, kind of in the background. And Buchla USA have been kind of selling those, and they've been giving that a bit of a go. Also, they've been redesigning the music easel, which is brilliant. That was a perfect thing to do, because that is just an extraordinarily aspirational instrument, and it's fantastic that they need to keep that going in both vintage and sort of more modern forms. So yeah, perfect, good job there. So what am I talking about that's happening now? Well, now Roman and Buchla have got together to create this new store called the Source of Uncertainty, which of course is a reflection upon the Source of Uncertainty module within the 200 series. doesn't matter. All I'm saying is that they've put together this new shop which is exclusively selling Buchla format, reissue and reimagined modules. And so far they've got, I don't know, about a dozen modules up there already. All the sort of usual ones and important ones, but there's more coming. And in particular, they've got this massively wide keyboard, expressive keyboard controller, which is like the one you get in the Buchla easel, just sort of twice the size, and that's a phenomenal piece of work. And they've got other stuff coming, so that Roman was saying by the end of the year they should pretty much have everything available. I mean, they're pricey. You're talking about £1,000 for a module, as opposed to ERAE, which is somewhere between £100 to £500 a module. So it's a serious investment, but these are properly built, properly engineered, properly designed. Sounds like the original Buchla sponsored and collaborated with modules. They're also producing a proper folding case. You know, the whole lot is going to be there, so you can or will be able to buy a proper Buchla entire system of these reissued modules, and that's going to be amazing, potentially amazing. So they threw this party. They threw a party for themselves, essentially. Oh, you know, why not do that? And they filled this space, you know, a cool space, a space where there's beer to drink and places to hang out. They filled this cool space with all the people who couldn't afford to do NAMM. So, like, you know, Noise Engineering were there, Catalyst Audio were there, all sorts of little synth and modular people were there, which is exactly what they need. That's brilliant. What a great idea. So that everyone could enjoy the hospitality of Buchla and feel warm about that and try out a few of their bits and actually look at the other stuff that they could probably afford. So it was an absolute genius PR move, I would say, and it fills me with a certain amount of excitement about the idea that they are really taking hold of things, because I've often felt writing about Buchla that it's just, it feels like it's just some old bloke in a shed somewhere, you know, not unlike myself, who doesn't have the time to do social media or anything interesting. Is just sort of knocking out, I'm going to build one music easel, and there he is building one music easel. And that was just the impression I got for many years. So this feels like it's cascading into something better and something more polished and produced, and I think that's brilliant. Totally brilliant. So the Buchla and Friends show had lots of great stuff in it, too much to talk about at the moment, but the one that I will focus on is Catalyst Audio. Now they had got together with a friend and they'd robbed Soviet era Russia of a whole bunch of tubes. I don't know, found them in a hangar somewhere. Apparently these vacuum tubes come from MiG fighters from the 1980s. So maybe they went in with Clint Eastwood and tried to steal Firefox, but didn't quite manage it, but did come away with a couple of bags of tubes. Maybe, who can say? Anyway, they've designed a series of modules based upon these tubes that include a VCO, a VCF, a VCA, a noise generator and a mixer. And they've used quite innovative ways of generating the sounds. You've got like a pair of tubes in the oscillator, each one generating half of the waveform, so it's rattling between the two audio rate, generating these waveforms, which of course naturally have this kind of, oh my goodness, don't know what I'm doing vibe about them, as well as once you start changing the balance between those tubes, it starts to break the waveform apart into interesting timbres and possibilities, and then overdrive. Then it has another tube in it for doing folding. So from there it then goes into a dual tube filter, which does something similar, and both of these, the oscillator and the filter, have this amazing amount of resonance that these tubes can generate, a kind of, I guess, a boiling of harmonics at the leading edge of wherever it is that it's doing. And from there into a similarly tube endowed VCA, so by the time you get to the end of this signal chain, it's just dripping in overdriven, saturated, tube laden warmth. I mean, they look great too. There's a noise thing as well, you know, it deteriorates, all sorts of pitching, noising and deteriorating noising. There's a mixer, allows you to mix stuff together, which also overdrives. Everything gets flipping overdriven through these warmth-inducing little glow bots. So yeah, fantastic stuff. That's going to be around in the summer, I think, is the plan, and it's limited edition because they could only get so much stuff out of the bunker that they found before the whole thing blew up. And finally, of course, I've got to talk about Synth East and associated bits and pieces. Synth East, in case you don't know, where have you been? Is a Norwich-based synthesizer show taking place at the end of February, 23rd, 24th, 25th. The idea is it's an expo, like NAMM, like the Buchla and Friends thing, but in Norwich, at the Norwich Arts Centre, bring together a whole bunch of manufacturers to show their synths, and throughout that day we'll thread through some awesome and unique performances from modular artists and other people and bits and pieces. It's a fantastic day, and that's just the Saturday daytime. Friday night we've got this awesome thing going on which is now sold out, so I'm not going to tell you about it because it's pointless. But it's fantastic, and you can go and check the website to find out what it is that you're going to be missing. Saturday night we've got Blancmange and Ultramarine playing, and also myself along with Gaz and Milo Melodies are putting on a bit of a jam as well. Sunday we have DIY workshops. Now, so Saturday daytime there's about 30 tickets left, roughly speaking. The evening there's a few more, so you don't need to worry about that too much. That should, because of the evening it's standing, so we can fit a lot more people in. But during the day, we've restricted it to about 200 people, which is about the maximum we can fit into the space around all the tables. And so those tickets are selling fast. So don't delay, get your ticket now. And there's room in the evening, as I say, on the Sunday. There's 5 spaces left on the Bafako DIY workshops, and there's about 8 spaces left, I think, on the Thonk one. So if you fancy building a module, building a module from a kit. I mean, how fantastic is that? Learn how to solder, learn how to do it properly under the supervision of people who know what they're doing. It's a great opportunity. I'll be there jamming a bit of modular and having a chat and so on and so forth. And so that will be the Sunday. So this is all happening very, very soon. And I've got a lot of work to do to get that off the ground. But a couple of other things around that. The day before Synth East, I am running a couple of workshops at the Norwich Science Fair on modular and synthesizers. I'll be using the Erica Synths Bullfrog synths, which is a fantastic way of teaching synthesizers, and there's about 20 spaces on each of those workshops for me to teach your kids about synthesizers. It's aimed at kids, really, I believe, but you'll go and find out everything you need to know at the Norwich Science Fair website, where you can book your place. So come and enjoy that. And then a couple of weeks after Synth East is the Norfolk County Music Festival, where I'm running the brand new electronic music category, which is very exciting. And the idea is you come and you perform just for 5 minutes in an environment of a relatively big venue, of a stage, and you get then critiqued by an adjudicator who tells you how to do your thing even better than you already are. It's fantastic. I've done a video on it. Get in touch if you'd be interested in being part of that. And that is going to be awesome, and I'll talk about it again probably in the next Molten Monthly. So that, I think, is all of that. It's probably enough, I imagine. Now, I have difficulties with birthdays over this weekend, so I can't do my weekend live stream, so I'm going to try to do it Wednesday night. That all depends on me getting this video finished soon enough for this to go out, so that people to understand that Wednesday, so this coming Wednesday, which is what? The 31st of January, this Wednesday night, 8 o'clock, we'll do the live stream thing. It'll be great. We'll just kick back, play some tunes, talk about crap, and generally have a good time. Thursday night is EMOM night, the first, at the Rumsey Wells in Norwich. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be taking some stuff along to play some tunes and generally relax into the awesomeness of people performing their little bits and pieces. Fantastic. So EMOM, the Rumsey Wells in Norwich, from 7:30 if you want to sign up to play. Come along, it'll be a great time. And that, I think, is enough. I think my voice is about to give out of this constant talking that I've been doing for hours now, competing with the builders next door. Whew, lots to come. I'm in the middle of about half a dozen different videos, which is very exciting. The Neo Trinity, the Chroma, pedal. You can see about that there. Yeah, okay. I got that. I've got all sorts of drums and stuff to talk about. I've got different modules. I've got something over there I'm not allowed to talk about yet that I need to do a video on. It's exciting times, masses of stuff, and I've got to prepare a performance for Thursday and then another one for Synth East. No end to it. It's very exciting. Glad that you're here and watching this sort of thing, and do please consider the idea of supporting me on Patreon so that I can at least feed my family while I'm doing this craziness. That would be great. And do all the subscription stuff and blah de blah de blah. That would be awesome. You're awesome. No, you're awesome. And in the meantime, go make some tunes.